what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
All of us need to be reminded that the federal government did not create the states. The states created the federal government.
Most of the people, when they start appraising things, are in an aquarium. You're used to the temperature of the water. You're familiar with the fish and the shells and the pieces around you. You're familiar with them, and you've got a worldview that's compartmentalized inside of an aquarium. A lot of the things that happen in there act very true, and you can go back into your history inside that aquarium and test what is true for you. Now, if you get outside that aquarium, if you're a fish out of water, or you're no longer compartmentalized, you'll find that there's a much larger world. There's a lot more going on than just what's entering us through our five senses. There have been people for years that want to control the world. Some of this is natural. Some of it reaches the point of evil. You've got the nearest formulated, documented time was the formation of the Illuminati in 1776. And that was done by a person that replaced the head of the Jesuits in Ingolstadt University in Europe. And we wouldn't know about this unless a horseman carrying secret papers wasn't struck by lightning. They went and they got the information, and they found the headquarters, one of the headquarters, and when they went to the headquarters, they found ways to recruit, they found codes, they found methods to poison, they found the profession to overthrow all the existing authorities and religious authorities in Europe to elevate those people themselves, not for the good of the community, not for the good of mankind, but for their own sake. And so it translates, it's different than what the authorities now that are combining all the information, that it's always for our own good, it's for the children, it's for the planet, it's for all these other reasons that we give away our individual freedom. They adopted a Hegelian method. This Hegelian method, it sounds confusing, but it is not. It's very simple. They saw the way to power is to control opposing sides. It's very simple. If you want to sail a ship from San Francisco to Japan, you use the current winds, you lower and drop the sails depending on which way the wind blows. You don't care which way the wind blows. In fact, if you can get the winds to blow or aggravate things to make things, create power, as long as you've got control of both sides, you're going to direct it and you're going to accumulate that power and you're going to dispense with that machine or that wind or whatever happened at that time. That's irrelevant to your goal. Another way to explain it would, if you were riding a horse, you pull on the reins on one side, the horse will go this way. If you pull on the reins, the left reins, the horse will go the other way. If you pull on both, it'll slow. If you hit the spurs, it'll go faster. It's a very simple mechanism. It's just referred to as the Hegelian method to gain control. The other thing that's incorporated throughout their accumulation of power is that they believe that the state is everything. The individual is irrelevant. It's always the greater good. The individual is dispensable. The state is God marching through history, is what they see. Well, there were two people that wrote about the Illuminati when they were discovered. One was in France. It was Abbé Beruel, and another person was John Robison in England. And the year after John Robison translated it to English, he sent a copy to George Washington. And George Washington says in a quote that's buried in my papers here, it's not as easily to retrieve, but it's easy for you to find and Google. He says, I am aware and it is here. He says, I have no doubt that it is here and I've recognized it. So you've had a sprinkling of it. After Bavaria and a couple other local states banned it, they went from 5 to 2,500. And they were already accumulating a lot of power, and they had convinced a number of princes throughout Europe to adopt it. There were some that were, they ran to the safe havens around Europe. And what they did from there, they kept changing the names. They don't use, they don't wear a sign on them saying who they are. And you can pull that practice all the way to Skull and Bones, which if Skull and Bones is mentioned, they're supposed to leave the room according to their own papers. Now, there's a direct link to Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones is a secret society. It was set up in New Haven, Connecticut in 1832. It was done by two people. One was Alphonso Taft, and the other was William Russell. William Russell had the drug trade from Europe to China. He actually ended up causing the Boxer Rebellion in China because of their whole nation was broken because of the drugs that were abused there. There is also, William Russell had gone to Germany for schooling before he went back to New Haven and created Skull and Bones. And there were direct links to members of the Illuminati with the Skull and Bones. In the early 80s, I was very fortunate to rent to a man by the name of Dr. Anthony Sutton. He was a fellow at the University of Stanford, and he had been working on for a decade or so a trilogy documenting the Western technology moving to the Soviet Union. And he documents it from 1919 to the present at that time, which was an active Vietnam War. And he brought this information. He's looking at it because even at the present day, when the Vietnam War was active and we were losing our boys and our daughters, we were still funding the manufacturer from the Kama truck factory in the Soviet Union that was delivering the materials to the Viet Cong. The British ships were going in the Haiphong harbor delivering the weapons to kill our own boys, and that was off limits for bombing. It was outrageous. The actual revolution in Russia, there were several people that went to Russia that are again tied to the United States. In New York City, there's a street called 120 Broad Street. It ended up the headquarters of the Federal Reserve, the first embassy for the Soviet Union, General Electric, which has played its role in conspiracy since that time to today. Of course, they had no taxes this last year. We heard they made $13 billion and didn't pay a dime. But they are blessed because they are connected to this conspiracy. Now, there was a Red Cross mission that went to Russia, and there's a man that said he is there to win Russia for Wall Street. And other people on the mission, when people wrote their diaries, people that were on this journey, laughed at some of the other people that were on the journey because they didn't know what the mission was all about. And you can find that in a book by Dr. Anthony Sutton, and I believe it's Wall Street and
Bolshevik Revolution.
Let's see, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. But he documents how so-called we were there. Again, it was years earlier in I don't know if we have a slide, but you'll find it in I didn't bring that particular book, Creature from Jekyll Island by Ed Griffin. And he has a cartoon in there, and the cartoon shows J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, and with bowing down to Karl Marx. This is 1911, 8 years before the Communist Revolution. And it was those people that were involved.
And then the Rockefellers funded Marx's work throughout his career.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All the ties and the funding begin. I mean, they created it. In fact, Alphonso Taft, the creator of the Skull and Bones, was an ambassador to Russia during the late 1800s. And you've got, even before the Communist Revolution, we did a little bit of this previous time, we talked about the American-Mexican War. The Spanish-American War, let me put it that way. And that's where our battleship was in their harbor less than 48 hours. Normally they have a protocol if you're going into a foreign port with a military ship, you let somebody know. We didn't let them know. The main exploded inside out from later documentation, and we had ships already in Hong Kong,
like buildings
ready to
collapsing,
go into the
pancake
we had
without any resistance.
Off of Florida, ready to take over Mexico, and, I mean Cuba and Puerto Rico, and I mean it was a planned event, very much like other false flags. And we've got to hear a guy from We Are Change here tonight, and he can tell you all about 9/11. I think a lot of you people are familiar with that.
Absolutely. We Are Change,
what
Connecticut.
Was important, that cartoon was written by a man by the name of Robert Minor, M-I-N-O-R. And Benjamin Getlow, one of the top heads of the Communist Party, said he was the most important American figure in communism. He said he comprehended the paradoxical ethical concepts of Lenin and justified every violation or moral code, including the most heinous crimes. This is the other thing you have to understand about this conspiracy, is their pure evilness. They are evil. They are bad. They're not doing it for something good, for a new world government or order, or even a pleasant feudal system. These people are evil, and they've adopted skull and bones. That's the skull and crossbones. Their rituals. They crawl into a coffin. They use human remains, and they make their pledge to each other for this secrecy and this control. Robert Minor said Lenin could not afford to tell the whole truth about his entrance of non-Bolsheviks into the government. He must maintain an intransigent front. The so-called nationalization of Russian industry has put the insurgent history back into the hands of the business class, who disguise their activity by giving orders under the magic title of the People's Commissars. Now, does that sound recent or familiar with the various industries being nationalized, and then they're going back to the GEs and the General Motors and the things, or you even have the name Commissars? But anyway, this is czars. I had to take the comma off. You can find that information in a book by Benjamin Getlow called The Whole of Their Lives. And he talks about how the whole of, these various communists were involved. They spent the whole of their lives working for their dreams. Some of them even, a lot of them bought the idea that communism is good. We've seen what it really does. It's a concentration of power. Communism is a tool of the international bankers. Now, democracy is a tool of the international bankers. You will not find the word democracy mentioned once in the Declaration of Independence. You won't find democracy mentioned once in any of the 50 state constitutions. You won't find democracy once in the United States Constitution. You're going to go back to Robert Minor again. This is really important because we see today riots on, people on both sides, and they both have their issues, and they're creating this cockfight in order to take our attention away from what they're doing. Now, they collect the fee when you come in to watch the fight. They don't care which side wins because they control both sides. But they're trying to get this thing going so that they can keep fleecing us like they have for, it's so obvious. I don't need to recount what's happened to us in the last few years.